You think I'm stealing from you?" Her voice was deep and calm, but hard as steel. A black woman, her eyes locked onto the CEO of the company, the man who had just accused her of theft simply because she often left work early. That day, the moment work ended, he decided to follow her. And when he arrived at the place, what he saw left him stunned like a slap straight to his face, delivered by the harsh truth of his own mistaken prejudice. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The air was thick with the scent of flower and a quiet hum of activity. Simone Davies, a young black woman, stood poised at the threshold of the Haven Collective. Her work apron, typically pristine, was smudged, her sleeves casually pushed up, revealing strong forearms. In her hands, a large metal tray still bore the faint dusting of flour from the evening's baking. Her gaze, usually reserved, was now fixed unwavering on Ethan Vance. It held the steely resolve of a woman facing a confrontation she had neither sought nor wished to defer. Ethan, the youthful CEO of Vance Dynamics, a man whose presence alone could command silence in the most raucous of boardrooms, found an unfamiliar tremor deep within himself. This was undeniably not the conclusion he had envisioned for his evening. He, the architect of multi-million-dollar deals, had driven his sleek electric sedan down a winding, somewhat neglected alley behind an old, unassuming community church, all for the singular purpose of shadowing a junior associate, not merely any intern, but Simone Davies, the perpetually quiet one, unusually observant, unfailingly polite, and to his ingrained suspicion, utterly enigmatic. In Ethan's tightly controlled world, trust was an exorbitant luxury, one he had rarely afforded. He had carved out his formidable position in this unforgiving metropolis by anticipating every potential treachery long before it could manifest. So when digital project schematics began subtly disappearing, when confidential design drafts mysteriously vanished from secured servers, he hadn't waited for an explanation. He had observed, and when Simone began routinely departing from the office early, always with a subtly evasive explanation that simply didn't resonate with his meticulous mind, he made a decisive choice. He followed her. What he had rigidly anticipated was a clandestine exchange at a downtown hotel, a hushed handoff, a shadowy figure lurking with a slim briefcase. What he instead discovered was this: a faded brick building, its aged gutters showing signs of wear. Lines of elderly residents patiently awaiting warm, nourishing meals. Children, their faces alight with unbridled joy, racing through the small yard with makeshift toys. And at the very heart of it all, Simone, her sleeves now fully rolled, her laughter, genuine and unrestrained, deftly balancing trays of hearty stew and fresh bread as she patiently guided a small boy through English vocabulary meticulously printed on the back of discarded financial reports. His financial reports. And now they stood separated by only a few feet, face to face. "I have undeniably been observing your movements," Ethan finally conceded, his voice unexpectedly subdued. "I am acutely aware," she replied, her dark eyes unblinking. "I found it necessary to ensure your understanding. You were leaving the premises with highly confidential documents." He pressed a faint accusation still lingering in his tone. "You never offered any explanation as to your destination." "Mr. Vance." She began, lifting her chin with a subtle defiance. "I hardly believed I was obligated to provide a detailed itinerary of my private evenings. However, since you have chosen to inquire, those documents, once sealed and significant to you, are now merely repurposed scrap. I utilize them to print essential lesson plans for children who quite simply cannot afford the exorbitant cost of textbooks. And as for my early departures, it is because many of these individuals subsist on a single meal each day, and that vital meal for them is served today." Ethan's gaze drifted past her through the scratched, opaque window of the collective. Inside, a frail elderly man beamed as he meticulously folded paper napkins into intricate animalistic shapes for the delighted children. A quiet teenage girl patiently helped another lace up a pair of generously donated athletic shoes. "I had genuinely believed you were attempting to compromise our operations." He murmured the words, feeling foreign and clumsy on his tongue. Simone's expression remained steadfast, devoid of any trace of softening. "You perceived me as something inherently less than my true self." He opened his mouth, searching desperately for an adequate reply, but she took a deliberate step forward, not menacingly, merely asserting her undeniable presence. "I do not require your approbation," she stated, her voice resonating with quiet power. "I have no desire to be prominently featured in your corporate newsletter. What I require unequivocally is the essential space to consistently execute what is right in the fundamental dignity of not being shadowed and scrutinized as if I were some common criminal." Her words delivered with quiet conviction, cut with surgical precision. "There exists a profound difference," she added, her voice now softer yet no less impactful, "between being genuinely seen and merely being observed. I have unequivocally endured more than my share of the latter. There are moments in life that force us to truly question our perceptions. Do we genuinely comprehend the complexities of others, or do we regrettably only ever view them through the distorting prism of our own preconceived judgments? What indeed do you believe? Does Ethan truly merit a second chance, a genuine opportunity for redemption, or should Simone have maintained an even more unyielding stance? We invite you to share your considered thoughts in the comments section below. Do inform us which bustling city you are observing this narrative from, allowing us to forge connections from every disparate corner of our vast world. And if this story has in any way stirred a chord within your heart, we earnestly implore you to click the like button to help disseminate its powerful message. For who can truly know, your unique perspective might just ignite a profound conversation that compels us all to pause to reflect and to genuinely think. Ethan's throat constricted, a sensation entirely unfamiliar to him. He had, with ruthless efficiency, negotiated hostile corporate takeovers, systematically dismantled formidable rivals, and emerged from grueling legal hearings utterly unfazed. But this encounter resonated with a raw, unexpected sensation of deep shame. "I am profoundly sorry, Simone," he managed to articulate. She offered a single concise nod, not as an overt gesture of forgiveness, but rather as a quiet yet firm acknowledgement of his words. "Next time," she stated, her voice carrying a quiet authority, "perhaps endeavor to inquire before allowing doubt to consume your judgment of another." With that, she turned with an effortless grace and vanished into the warm, inviting light emanating from the center, returning to the lively presence of the children, the serene wisdom of the elders, to the vibrant, understated life she had never once sought to publicize. Ethan remained standing there for an extended period. The late evening air, cool and surprisingly crisp, brushed against the expensive fabric of his tailored suit, making it feel for an unsettling moment as though it belonged to an entirely different person. His world, a meticulously constructed edifice of spreadsheets, abstract numbers, and cold, calculating strategy, had just been unexpectedly laid bare, its very seams pulled open by a young woman he had, until this pivotal moment, truly failed to know. As he slowly made his way back to his waiting vehicle, a familiar voice echoed softly within the chambers of his mind, not Simone's, but an almost forgotten echo of his own from a lifetime ago. People do not fundamentally alter the world through the sheer exercise of power. They transform it quietly and profoundly by consistently doing what is unequivocally right. He had regrettably allowed himself to forget that fundamental truth until this very moment. And as the sprawling city lights flickered on one by one behind him, Ethan Vance did not feel powerful. He felt, for the first time in a very long time, simply human. And for the first time in what felt like countless years, that profound, simple feeling was entirely sufficient. Ethan Vance did not immediately initiate his drive homeward. He remained seated behind the steering wheel for an exceptionally long duration, his gaze fixed on the spiderweb of cracks marring the windshield of an old battered sedan parked directly opposite his own vehicle. The street outside the Haven Collective was now enveloped in a profound quiet, the center's interior lights dimming one by one, leaving only the soft, persistent glow of an aging exit sign as the sole visible trace of life within. The vivid image of Simone, resolute and perfectly composed, standing there with that simple tray in her hands, continued to burn with an insistent heat in his mind's eye. Her words delivered neither loudly nor angrily, yet carrying an undeniable sense of finality, echoed with resonant clarity. "Next time, perhaps endeavor to inquire before allowing doubt to consume your judgment of another." He leaned back heavily against the plush leather seat, closing his eyes. The electric hum of the car's advanced engine thrummed softly beneath his feet, yet he remained motionless. How many countless times had he so utterly misjudged? How many individuals had he casually overlooked, carelessly dismissed, or reflexively distrusted, simply because they failed to conform to the rigid appearances, the expected vocal inflections, or the prescribed behaviors that his insular corporate world demanded? This realization transcended merely an intern. It was fundamentally about him. His entire meticulously constructed empire was founded upon a bedrock of extreme caution, upon a pervasive suspicion artfully veiled in superficial charm, upon raw data masquerading as innate instinct. He had ascended to the apex in a city where every seemingly cordial handshake came with an unspoken caveat, where the very concept of trust was perpetually viewed as a dangerous liability. That deeply ingrained mindset had served him remarkably well within the confines of bustling boardrooms, but in the grand, unpredictable theater of life tonight had rendered a quiet yet utterly definitive verdict. When he finally slowly eased his car away from the curb, it was not with the accustomed confidence of a man possessing all the answers. Instead, it was the humble retreat of someone who had just received an essential lesson he had not until this very moment realized he so desperately required. The following morning, Simone arrived at the Vance Dynamics office, precisely as she always did, early, unobtrusive, impeccably efficient, her rich, dark hair meticulously tied back in a low, neat bun, her worn laptop hugged securely to her chest. She made no discernible mention of the significant events of the previous night. She offered a polite, almost imperceptible nod to the front desk attendant, stepped into the waiting elevator ascending to the 32nd floor, and slipped into her cubicle with an understated grace that artfully concealed any lingering trace of confrontation. Ethan observed her from the expansive glass walls of his executive office. He stood motionless, his artisanal coffee cooling, forgotten in his hand, watching her meticulously unpack her belongings as if absolutely nothing had transpired. He did not summon her. He did not dispatch an email. Instead, he simply sat at his sprawling desk and opened a fresh blank document on his screen. For an extended period, the cursor blinked with a silent, expectant rhythm. Then, with a slow, deliberate certainty, he typed the words, "The Haven Collective Confidential Grant Proposal." The profound irony of the situation was certainly not lost on him. Just 24 hours prior, he had harbored the grave suspicion that she was illicitly smuggling company secrets. Now, he was consciously employing the very resources of the corporation to meticulously devise a strategy to provide concrete assistance to her and to the countless individuals she so selflessly served. That same afternoon, he placed a discreet call to his head of corporate philanthropy. "Do we still retain the significant community impact fund allocated from the recent Stratton acquisition?" he inquired, his voice carefully modulated. "Yes, Mr. Vance," came the crisp reply. "Approximately $450,000 remains available. Are you considering an allocation? All of it," Ethan stated with quiet finality. "And if at all feasible, ensure it remains entirely anonymous." To which specific cause the voice on the other end probed a hint of curiosity coloring the polite tone. Ethan paused, a brief, almost imperceptible hesitation. He found himself unable in that moment to utter her name aloud. "Simply to a community center located in the South Chicago district, the Haven Collective. You will undoubtedly locate it." A beat of silence stretched on the other end of the line, then a subtle intake of breath, a quiet recognition of understanding. Simone began to notice the subtle yet undeniable changes long before she could pinpoint their precise source. 2 weeks later, a prominent food supplier delivered double the usual rations to the Haven Collective. A local independent bookstore generously donated 75 new Spanish-English literacy kits. Then a substantial unsigned check arrived sufficient to cover the installation of a brand new high-efficiency HVAC unit for the approaching brutal winter months. Pastor Elias diligently attempted to trace the elusive donor, yet consistently encountered frustrating dead ends. When he finally inquired of Simone if she possessed any knowledge regarding the unexpected benefaction, she simply shook her head, though a quiet, nascent suspicion began to coalesce within her discerning mind. At the office, Ethan maintained a measured distance. He meticulously reviewed her project reports, not because he harbored any lingering suspicions, but because he now genuinely desired to comprehend the intricate workings of her remarkable mind. She was undeniably exceptional, far surpassing the capabilities of most interns the firm had ever welcomed. Her proposals were models of meticulous precision, her constructive feedback invariably insightful, and yet she rarely, if ever, spoke unless directly addressed, until the momentous day she did. It was a Friday, late in the evening, most of the staff having already departed. Ethan was immersed in the labyrinthine intricacies of quarterly financial figures when he perceived a soft, tentative knock at his office door. "Enter!" He called out, his voice slightly abstracted. Simone stepped inside, clutching a thin, unassuming folder. She did not immediately take a seat. "I have completed the comprehensive audit on the Aurora project account," she stated, her voice calm and steady. "There appears to be a distinct troubling pattern within the subcontracts. I believe someone is engaging in double-charging schemes." Ethan took the folder, his fingers brushing hers briefly, and flipped it open. Her meticulously compiled notes were strikingly clear, remarkably concise, and utterly damning in their implications. "This is truly exceptional work," he murmured, a genuine surprise coloring his tone. "You may have quite literally averted a significant corporate scandal." She did not offer a smile. "I did not come here seeking commendation." Ethan looked up, meeting her gaze. "Then pray tell, why are you here?" Simone hesitated a fleeting moment of vulnerability. Then, with quiet resolve, "Because I needed to ascertain if I still genuinely belong within these walls." He stared at her, a profound silence filling the spacious office. "I am aware of what you did," she added, her voice barely above a whisper. "With the anonymous donation, the sudden influx of supplies. I refrained from speaking of it because I desperately wanted to believe it stemmed from genuine sincerity. But if it is merely guilt, if you are simply attempting to atone for having spied on me, then I would rather depart this place entirely than be anyone's reluctant penance." Her voice, though steady, betrayed a subtle tremor in her hands. Ethan rose slowly from his seat. He did not circle the vast expanse of his desk. He merely stood, his heart thudding with an unexpected profound intensity. "It was not, Simone, the burden of guilt," he stated, his voice ringing with newfound conviction. "It was unequivocally the profound weight of respect. The very kind of respect I should have from the very outset, unequivocally extended to you." Simone blinked slowly, absorbing his words. "You unequivocally opened my eyes," he continued, his gaze unwavering. "Not merely to the exceptional quality of your work, but to the alarming extent of my own profound blindness within the confines of my own endeavors. That, Simone, undeniably warrants far more than a simple deafening silence." For the very first time, a flicker of genuine uncertainty crossed her face. "I never in truth desired to be seen," she murmured quietly, her voice tinged with a quiet vulnerability. "Only to be profoundly understood." And for once, Ethan Vance, the man who invariably commanded the final word, uttered nothing further, because she, in that profound moment, had said absolutely enough. The following week, the sprawling office hummed with its familiar, relentless rhythm printers, clicking with mechanical precision, the crisp tap of heels echoing along the polished marble floors, a low murmur of hushed conversations drifting from behind frosted glass partitions. But something undeniably had subtly shifted within Ethan. He no longer perceived his diverse staff as mere interchangeable cogs within a vast impersonal corporate machine. Now he recognized layers, saw intricate histories, observed individuals meticulously concealing rich, multifaceted lives behind veneers of tightly controlled professionalism. He had not engaged in conversation with Simone again since their last profoundly candid exchange. Not because he lacked the desire, but because he deeply respected the unspoken space that her powerful words had implicitly demanded. "I never in truth desired to be seen, only to be profoundly understood." That single resonant line echoed ceaselessly with every measured step he took down the seemingly endless hallway. It compelled him with an almost painful introspection to question just how many invaluable voices he had summarily ignored in his relentless, all-consuming pursuit of abstract perfection. Then came the highly anticipated quarterly review meeting. Simone was specifically requested to present her meticulous analysis of 3 critical project portfolios, each intrinsically tied to multi-million-dollar funding initiatives. Normally, an intern, regardless of their proficiency, would never be permitted to speak, let alone present in such a high-stakes meeting. It was quite simply unheard of. But Ethan, with a quiet, unyielding authority, made the decisive call. "Allow her to lead the Aurora Project segment," he stated flatly, his tone devoid of any room for discussion. No one dared to argue, not when the CEO's voice carried that particular unmistakable edge of absolute finality. When Simone stood before the massive gleaming mahogany boardroom table, facing 15 attentive directors and a solitary, immense projection screen, she maintained her composure with an almost tangible grace like protective armor. Dressed in a simple, elegant navy suit, her face devoid of any noticeable makeup, only a single delicate silver bracelet adorning her wrist, she cleared her throat with quiet dignity and began her presentation. 15 minutes into her meticulously articulated delivery, something truly remarkable transpired. The assembled directors listened not out of mere corporate politeness, but out of an undeniable emergent necessity. She possessed the unassailable facts. She articulated a compelling, forward-thinking vision. She didn't merely identify inherent risks, she proactively proposed innovative solutions, ones that were not only intellectually smart and eminently scalable, but crucially deeply human-centered. Even the most seasoned partners, those who rarely condescended to lift their gazes from their meticulously printed reports, were now watching her with an intense, almost rapt attention. And Ethan, he leaned back deeper into his chair, utterly silent, imbued with a profound sense of pride that he found utterly inexplicable. It was not the possessive pride of ownership nor the detached pride of mentorship, but something far more intimate, far more personal. He was in that transformative moment witnessing someone truly, unequivocally come into her own. When Simone finally concluded her presentation, a palpable, almost reverent pause settled over the expansive room. "Then, she has without question just saved us at least 6 months of potential litigation." One senior partner murmured, his voice laced with unfeigned admiration. Another nodded emphatically. "Promote her. Bypass the traditional program entirely." Ethan remained silent, allowing the weight of the moment to settle until the room had largely cleared. Simone lingered meticulously, gathering her laptop and notes when he spoke. "Kindly close the door if you would." She complied carefully and deliberately. "You knew, didn't you, that they would truly listen?" Ethan observed, his voice a quiet statement. "I did not," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "But I harbored the profound hope that the undeniable data would resonate far louder than the voice delivering it." He offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "For the official record, Simone, your voice performed exceptionally well." She offered a mere hint of a smile in return, but her eyes remained wary guarded. "I genuinely wish for you to seriously consider remaining with us." He stated his proposal, hanging in the quiet air. "Beyond the confines of this internship, I will personally fund any additional training you require. Project management, public finance, strategic development, you name it, and it's yours." Simone looked down, her gaze fixed on the polished mahogany table. "Why precisely?" she asked, her voice tinged with a quiet skepticism. "Because you are unequivocally extraordinary," he said, then paused, allowing his words to gain additional weight. "And because the world, quite frankly, desperately requires more individuals who lead with both exceptional skill and profound purpose, not merely one or the other." She did not respond immediately, her thoughts seemingly far away. "Then I will indeed give it considerable thought." That very weekend, Ethan embarked upon an action entirely uncharacteristic of his meticulously ordered life. He returned to the Haven Collective. No personal driver, no hovering press entourage, no preset schedule, just himself, a casual jacket, and a substantial bag of used books he had personally retrieved from his extensive home library. Mostly biographies, venerable classics, forgotten poetry collections, all previously gathering dust in silent neglect. He hesitated at the entrance, feeling acutely like an intrusive outsider, until a small boy with shaggy, unruly hair spotted him and waved with uninhibited enthusiasm. "You came back!" the boy shouted, his voice ringing with pure surprise. Simone, who had been diligently working at a large folding table, turned. "Surprised perhaps, but not entirely alarmed," she murmured, a faint smirk playing on her lips. Ethan walked slowly inside. "I have brought some books," he announced, lifting the bag slightly, a peace offering. "Actual books." Another child, eyes wide with genuine wonder, whispered reverently. "Hardcover, do they even smell like old wood?" "Indeed," Ethan replied, a genuine smile finally cracking his reserved composure. Laughter, light and unburdened, bubbled up around him. Someone in a far corner gently placed a needle on a record player, and the smooth, soulful strains of Motown music began to fill the space. Ethan carefully placed the books onto a sturdy shelf, then found himself unexpectedly seated between two wise elders who were deeply engaged in a spirited yet friendly debate regarding the superior merits of chicken broth versus rich beef stew. Simone joined him later, offering him a flimsy paper cup of tart lemonade. "I truly didn't anticipate seeing you here again," she said, her voice soft. "I honestly didn't anticipate coming," Ethan admitted, his gaze sweeping across the vibrant, bustling room. "But there's something about this place that feels utterly distinct, like a world existing entirely outside the rigid confines of the world I've known." She simply finished his sentence with a quiet nod. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, simply observing the gentle flow of life around them. Then Simone posed the question, her voice tinged with curiosity. "Do you in retrospect regret having followed me?" Ethan considered the question with profound introspection. "Yes," he replied, his voice low and candid, "but only because it exposed to me the vast, unsettling distance I had inadvertently strayed from the very kind of person I once held in the highest esteem." Simone offered no verbal response, but she didn't need to. Her very presence, her unwavering calm, her quiet yet undeniable resilience, they were in themselves profound and complete answers. As the late afternoon sun dipped lower, painting the dusty windows in hues of molten gold, a small girl, Maya, climbed onto Simone's lap and shyly offered Ethan a crayon drawing. It depicted a whimsical house, a bright sun, and 3 simple stick figures. "You're the tall one," Maya explained, pointing a small crayon-stained finger. Ethan chuckled, a genuine, unforced sound. "I can most certainly live with that." When he departed from the Haven Collective that evening, the autumn air was crisp and invigorating, fallen leaves crunching softly beneath his expensive shoes. He felt remarkably lighter, not because the world itself had undergone some miraculous transformation, but because he had. In the distant panorama, the sleek skyscrapers still glowed with a cold silver detachment. But for the very first time in years, Ethan Vance did not feel utterly alone in the sprawling city. He felt instead profoundly connected, as if the invisible paper walls he had meticulously constructed around himself had begun to crumble, and genuine welcoming doors were at long last opening. Monday arrived enveloped in the kind of dreary gray sky that made Chicago feel older, heavier than its years. Rain whispered incessantly down the towering office windows, just enough to blur and distort the familiar skyline outside Ethan's corner office. He was already present, his tie-loosened sleeves casually rolled meticulously, reviewing Simone's groundbreaking proposal for restructuring the firm's entire community engagement strategy. It was quite simply brilliant, not merely practical, but truly visionary. She possessed an innate understanding not only of where financial resources should be directed, but where they would genuinely, profoundly matter. He barely glanced up when his assistant, a young woman named Sarah, knocked softly on his office door. "You requested to be notified when Mr. Hayes arrived," she stated, her voice hushed. Ethan blinked, a fleeting moment of recognition. He had inexplicably forgotten. Mr. Hayes, the formidable head of corporate compliance, had scheduled this meeting weeks ago concerning a routine internal audit security review. "Send him in," Ethan instructed, his voice regaining its usual executive composure. Mr. Hayes strode in tall, impeccably sharp, every single word he uttered, seemingly meticulously wrapped in layers of suspicion and legal statutes. He was not overtly unkind, merely cold, meticulously calculated, remarkably similar, in fact, to the man Ethan himself had once been. "Good morning, Vance," Mr. Hayes said, offering a curt, almost perfunctory nod. "We need to discuss your intern." Ethan raised an eyebrow, a subtle flicker of apprehension. "Simone Davies," Mr. Hayes continued, his voice devoid of inflection. "She has been accessing accounts well outside her established clearance parameters. I flagged 2 distinct reports she pulled last Thursday. They are directly tied to proprietary real estate models, highly sensitive data." Ethan leaned back slowly, his heart performing an unsettling rapid skip. "She presented those very same models in our recent board review. I explicitly requested her to. I personally granted her temporary verbal clearance." Mr. Hayes frowned, a deep furrow appearing between his eyebrows. "You did. There is no recorded entry of that in the system." "I informed her verbally," Ethan explained, his voice maintaining an outward calm despite the internal disquiet. I simply hadn't updated the system with the official record yet. The man nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly, but his mouth tightened into a grim, unyielding line. Even so, Vance, it constitutes a clear breach by technical standards. Ethan felt a mounting pressure behind his eyes, a familiar tension. I will personally handle this matter. When Mr. Hayes finally departed, Ethan sat in profound silence. He wasn't angry with Simone. He was instead profoundly angry with himself for inadvertently creating an institutional environment where even her most pure and beneficial intentions could be so readily, so easily turned against her by the rigid, unfeeling machinery of bureaucracy. An hour later, he stepped into the executive elevator just as Simone was stepping out, a fleeting coincidence. "Wait," he called out, deftly catching the closing doors. "Walk with me if you would." She followed without question, her expression composed. As they moved deliberately through the quiet, carpeted hallway, Ethan succinctly explained the gravity of the situation. "They are actively investigating your access to the Aurora project files," he stated, his voice low. "It's a technicality, but it could regrettably become quite messy." Simone stopped walking abruptly, her steps halting. "Are they, in essence, accusing me of something tangible?" "Not formally as yet," Ethan clarified, "but Mr. Hayes does not, generally speaking, allow such matters to simply slide." She stared at the polished floor for a long moment, then met his gaze directly. "You had stated that you would unequivocally protect me." "I am Simone," Ethan replied, his conviction clear. "But I also crucially have to protect you from the very system I regrettably helped to construct." A profound, almost agonizing silence hung between them. Then Simone spoke, her voice quiet but resonant. "I can of course choose to leave." He frowned, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "You have unequivocally done nothing wrong." "That is not always regrettably enough," she stated, her voice laden with a quiet wisdom. "You know that, don't you?" And he did know far more profoundly than she could possibly realize. Being a young, aspiring white man at the very pinnacle of the corporate world had certainly not exempted him from countless silent trials and hushed, insidious accusations. It had simply painfully made him exceptionally adept at anticipating their arrival. "I will not under any circumstances permit them to tarnish your professional record," Ethan stated, his voice firm, unyielding. "I genuinely do not care what obscure forms or antiquated regulations they choose to quote." Simone nodded once, not in an explicit agreement, but rather in a quiet, solemn acknowledgement of his unwavering resolve. Then she posed a question that resonated with a deeper, more universal truth. Why is it invariably so effortlessly easy to suspect individuals who are simply striving to do what is right, and yet so profoundly difficult to accept that truly good work can exist entirely without a hidden agenda or a calculated angle? Ethan found he had no immediate answer. They parted ways quietly at the bustling cafe downstairs. Simone purchased a simple coffee and settled herself by the large window, her notebook open, but her gaze unfocused. Ethan watched her from across the expanse of glass, and in that moment, he saw not merely an intern, but someone under an insidious siege by a faceless, unfeeling corporate machine she had never truly signed up for. That evening, he arrived at a clear, unyielding decision. The very next day, he walked into the weekly executive meeting, a meticulously drafted document held firmly in his hand, revised clearance protocols for intern and junior staff collaboration. He passed copies of the document down the long, imposing table. "We are quite simply losing exceptional talent," he announced, his voice devoid of emotion, "because we fundamentally failed to trust individuals who have not yet earned some arbitrary, self-important title. That regrettable practice, gentlemen and ladies, stops today." There was predictably immediate pushback, a flurry of rapid-fire questions, a chorus of raised eyebrows, but Ethan stood his ground firm and unyielding. "This is not merely about a single intern," he asserted, his voice gaining an unmistakable force. "It is about fundamentally changing the deeply ingrained culture. We have all quietly and collectively nourished a culture where silence is tragically perceived as safer than the bold pursuit of innovation." And for once, no one dared to interrupt him. After the meeting, Mr. Hayes approached him, his mouth a tight, thin line. "You are undoubtedly setting a profound precedent, Vance." "I most certainly hope so," Ethan replied, his gaze unwavering. Later that same week, Simone received an official nondescript notice, clearance granted with recommendation for junior project lead training. It was dry, impersonal corporate language, Yet Marcus had personally affixed a small, brightly colored sticky note to it. "It's only a door, Simone. You are the one opening it." Simone held the note in her hands for a long moment, tracing the words with her thumb, then carefully folded it and slid it into her bag. She did not express gratitude. She did not need to. Friday arrived and the sky cleared for the very first time in what felt like weeks, bathing the city in a soft, ethereal light. Ethan passed Simone in the hallway, a casual encounter. "I am returning to the Haven Collective this weekend," she said, her voice quiet. "There's a significant mural project we're undertaking with the children. We could quite frankly use more brushes." He smiled a genuine, unforced expression. "I have an entire garage full." She raised an eyebrow, a hint of playful skepticism in her eyes. "You, Mr. Vance, know how to paint." "No." Ethan admitted, a small chuckle escaping him. "But I am exceptionally skilled at creating a magnificent mess." She laughed, the sound short, genuine, and surprisingly melodic. For a fleeting moment, they simply stood there, not as CEO and intern, not as power and burgeoning potential, but as two distinct individuals who had traversed a profound distance, measured not in literal miles, but in a burgeoning shared understanding. And somewhere between the oppressive silence of elevator rides and the fierce battles fought in polished conference rooms, Ethan had ceased to perceive Simone as an inherent risk. Now he saw her with profound clarity for what she truly was, a profound mirror eloquently reflecting the better man he still harbored the earnest hope of becoming. The late Saturday sun cast a warm, almost luminous amber hue over the cracked pavement of the South Chicago district. Children's laughter echoed joyfully off the graffiti-covered brick walls as a dozen small hands eagerly dipped brushes into overflowing buckets of vibrant paint, cobalt sunflower moss green. The outer wall of the Haven Collective, once faded and crumbling, was being miraculously transformed into a living, breathing story, a magnificent mural adorned with bright, smiling faces, open, beckoning books, and radiant rising suns. Simone stood near the very center of the bustling activity, her sleek ponytail tucked neatly under a worn baseball cap, patiently guiding a young boy's trembling hand as he meticulously traced the outline of a towering tree, his small fingers delightfully stained purple and gold. His eyes, intensely focused, were alight with genuine wonder. Across the modest lot, a dark gleaming SUV quietly pulled in. Ethan stepped out, holding a large plastic bag filled with brand new brushes and a half-dozen old paint-splattered shirts from his college days. He hadn't worn jeans in years, but today he did. He had even brought a pair of pristine white sneakers, now instantly speckled with bright blue, as he inadvertently stepped too close to a carelessly splattered can of paint. Simone looked up, her expression one of amused surprise, yet utterly unsurprised. "You actually showed up," she said, a faint smile playing on her lips. "I distinctly recall stating I had brushes," Ethan replied, lifting the bag slightly like a humble peace offering. "You also quite memorably said you'd make a magnificent mess." She smirked, a teasing glint in her eyes. "Consider that a promise unequivocally kept." The children giggled with uninhibited delight as he approached, some whispering excitedly. One pointed at his expensive watch, eyes wide with awe. Another nudged Simone, her voice a hushed stage whisper. "He's genuinely a boss." Simone knelt beside them, a gentle smile on her face. "He's learning, dear one." Ethan smiled, setting the bag down carefully. "Do you happen to possess any unclaimed wall space for my artistic endeavors?" She pointed to a narrow, unassuming column near the corner of the building. "That particular one is entirely yours. Absolutely no pressure, of course. Just the whole entire neighborhood will be privileged to witness it for many, many years to come." He chuckled nervously, a rare, unguarded sound. "Perfect." For the next 2 hours, Ethan painted, and he painted badly. His tree was undeniably crooked. The vibrant sky bled uncontrollably into the roof line of the building. A sun he ambitiously attempted to draw ended up looking strikingly more like a deeply confused tangerine, but he simply didn't care. He hadn't felt this utterly unguarded, this completely unburdened in what felt like countless years. Simone drifted over once, extending a cool bottle of water. "I don't believe your son is smiling, Mr. Vance," she observed, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Neither are most executives, miss." "Davies," Ethan replied, a flicker of his old wit returning. "Perhaps they should," she mused. He paused, his brush suspended midair. "You know, I genuinely used to be precisely like them. Every single day was consumed by abstract numbers, relentlessly shrinking margins, and performance metrics. People were merely tools, quantifiable assets. Simone did not respond immediately. Then quietly, now I see people as unequivocally people, he said, a note of wonder in his voice. Strange, isn't it? She shook her head gently. It is only strange, Mr. Vance, if you have in fact forgotten how to genuinely look. As the mural neared its breathtaking completion, Ethan stepped back, wiping his paint-stained hands on a nearby rag. Children danced joyfully around him, marveling at their own individual contributions, shimmering stars, soaring birds, giant expressive hearts, and a magnificent pair of open arms stretching across the very center of the mural, with powerful words painted in bold, sweeping script, "Where hope begins, fear ends." It literally took his breath away, not merely the art itself, but the overwhelming, profound feeling it evoked. For years, Ethan had meticulously defined success as the absolute control over people, over meticulously crafted plans, over predictable outcomes. But here, beneath the gentle fading sun, success seemed to manifest far more profoundly as surrender, a liberation from fear, a letting go of entrenched old habits, a relinquishing of the incessant need to always unequivocally be right. He turned to Simone. Would you ever genuinely consider building something of this magnitude full-time? She raised an eyebrow, a silent question in her gaze. Like what exactly? A foundation, perhaps. He elaborated, his voice filled with a newfound earnestness. Focused on education, on community reform, something comprehensively funded, meticulously structured, undeniably impactful. She crossed her arms, a characteristic gesture. Are you in essence offering me a position outside the rigid confines of the firm? I am offering you a path. He stated, his voice ringing with conviction. One where you will never be compelled to choose between diligently doing good and exceptionally doing well. Simone studied him, her expression utterly unreadable. I genuinely do not know, she eventually conceded. Every single time someone offers to build something, it invariably ends up generating far more paperwork than it does genuine purpose. Ethan chuckled, a genuine unforced sound. Spoken like someone who has unfortunately seen the wrong kind of boardroom Miss Davies. She glanced back at the vibrant mural, her gaze thoughtful. I would unequivocally need to build it entirely my way. I would not have it any other way, Simone. A long, significant pause stretched between them. Then Simone slowly extended her paint-covered hand. We will talk, Mr. Vance. After the final triumphant brushstroke, he took it, paint and all. Later that evening, as dusk settled gently over the city and the children were reluctantly herded home, Pastor Elias joined them near the beautifully transformed wall, sipping reflectively from a paper cup. She is truly special, that one, he observed, nodding toward Simone, who was now patiently cleaning brushes with two enthusiastic teenagers. Ethan nodded in agreement. I know. She does not typically trust with ease. She has earned absolutely everything twice over. Pastor Elias continued, his voice soft. And yet, she still consistently keeps her heart wide open. That, Mr. Vance, is a truly rare quality. Ethan looked at the vibrant mural again, his eyes thoughtful. She is without a doubt teaching me things I genuinely did not know I needed to learn. Pastor Elias smiled warmly. That is precisely what the very best people do, not through tiresome lecturing, but simply by unequivocally being. Ethan stood in comfortable silence, his hands thrust deep into his pockets, the cooling wind brushing gently against the slight sweat on his brow. That night, as he drove homeward, the indelible scent of fresh paint still clinging faintly to his clothes, Ethan Vance was not contemplating his next formidable deal, his next calculated acquisition, or the upcoming quarter's profit margins. He was instead thinking of a once empty wall, now magnificently filled with vibrant color, and of a remarkable woman who simply by unequivocally being herself was patiently teaching him how to genuinely see again. The buzz arrived Monday morning, not the kind that invigorated a productive workplace, but the kind that subtly warned of an impending storm gathering ominously beyond the sleek glass walls. Whispers slithered from cubicle to cubicle. Emails paused mid-sentence unsent. Even the persistent hum of the printers seemed quiet in anticipation. At precisely 10:17 a.m., Ethan's assistant entered his office, her face bearing a rare, palpable look of alarm. You absolutely must see this, Mr. Vance, she stammered, handing him her tablet. Ethan read the damning headline once, then again. Whistleblower leaks internal documents from Vance Dynamics citing abuse of community funds and improper hiring practices. He didn't blink. Not yet. He scrolled down deliberately. Attached to the incendiary article was a blurry, grainy PDF, a spreadsheet explicitly marked confidential, overtly displaying funds allegedly funneled into a non-profit organization with no discernible official status. The name The Haven Collective glared accusingly from the corner of the document. He read the accompanying text. Simone. He slowly set the tablet down on his desk. Who precisely published this? He asked, his voice low and dangerously calm. A local investigative blog, Mr. Vance, but it's spreading with alarming speed across all platforms. Ethan stood and moved deliberately to the expansive window. Rain traced slow, melancholic lines down the cool glass. He understood this insidious game intimately, the calculated smear, the insidious spin. A leak timed with a chilling precision, almost certainly originating from within. Someone undoubtedly harbored a deep dislike for the fundamental changes he had begun to enact, the nascent culture shift, the unprecedented promotion of an intern, the systematic redirecting of crucial funding away from entrenched self-serving pet projects and into genuine impactful initiatives like the Haven Collective. Someone desired him to be firmly reined in, his influence curtailed. Summon legal immediately, he instructed, turning back towards his assistant, his gaze sharp, and inform PR to stand by. We do not respond, not yet. I first require precise knowledge of who orchestrated this. By noon, the board had convened an emergency session. By 1 o'clock, the pointed, incisive questions began in earnest. Who precisely authorized the unsanctioned transfer to the Haven Collective? Where are the requisite receipts for such a substantial transaction? Why, pray tell, was a mere intern handling such sensitive financial accounts? Ethan answered calmly, his voice unwavering. I authorize the funding unequivocally, he stated with quiet clarity, and Simone Davies acted entirely under my direct instruction. Every single step she undertook was fully approved, even if I had not yet formalized it on paper. A murmur, a ripple of unease spread through the room. One director, older, inherently skeptical, leaned forward, his gaze piercing. And why specifically the Haven Collective? That is, to my knowledge, not a registered partner organization with our firm. Ethan met his gaze, directly unflinching. Because it is quite simply real, he asserted, his voice imbued with conviction. Because it is undeniably achieving more for this sprawling city than half the prestigious high-profile firms we have hosted elaborate galas for. The man blinked, momentarily taken aback. Do you desire genuine innovation, gentlemen, or do you merely demand interminable paperwork? Ethan added, his challenge hanging in the air. No one offered an immediate answer. But he knew with chilling certainty that the silence was not a triumph. It was a grave warning. Simone learned of the unfolding crisis just moments before her shift was slated to end. She was meticulously organizing receipts for an unrelated report when a co-worker whispered conspiratorially, Simone, you're on the news. She froze, her fingers instinctively clicking, reading the damning headlines. By the time she reached the elevator, Ethan's urgent message was already in her inbox. Subject. Come to my office. Now. She walked in, her jaw tight, her eyes hard with a nascent defiance. I did not, Mr. Vance, leak anything, she stated flatly before he could utter a single word. I know, Simone, Ethan replied, his voice gentle. Sit, she complied, slowly, cautiously. They are portraying this, Simone, as though I conferred upon you a level of power you were simply not prepared for. He explained, his voice laced with weariness, as if the simple act of helping people somehow inherently equates to corruption. Simone stared blankly at the desk, her gaze distant. It's entirely my fault. I should not have accepted the clearance without it being officially documented. I should have— No, Ethan interjected firmly, cutting her off. Simone, this is not about a singular mistake. This is about someone deliberately attempting to dismantle what we are so painstakingly building together. Simone looked up, her gaze meeting his. So what precisely do we do now? He hesitated a moment of profound contemplation. Then he stood straighter, his resolve hardening. We fight, Simone. Simone raised an eyebrow, a hint of skepticism in her voice. With what precisely? With good intentions, Simone, with unimpeachable records, with undeniable data, with every single damning report and every meticulously documented impact metric we have diligently compiled. And when by some unfortunate turn that proves insufficient, we will fight with the unwavering power of community. She leaned forward, her expression searching. Do you truly believe people outside these corporate walls care enough to genuinely speak up for us? I believe, Simone, they have been patiently waiting for someone to simply ask them to. By the conclusion of the week, they had painstakingly gathered compelling testimony from nearly every single partner the Haven Collective had touched. Dedicated parents, grateful teachers, aspiring students, even struggling small business owners from the neighborhood. Videos were meticulously edited, heartfelt statements carefully prepared. Simone met with the firm's newly appointed ethics chair, demanded a formal hearing, and presented a compiled brief that rivaled the complexity and thoroughness of most federal grant applications. She worked late every single night, and not alone. Ethan was invariably there beside her, sometimes engaging in spirited arguments over the precise phrasing of a sentence, sometimes simply fetching dinner when she adamantly refused to break her unwavering focus. At precisely 11:12 p.m. on Thursday, as they were meticulously reviewing a stack of affidavits, Simone paused, her gaze fixed on the documents. "Do you ever, Mr. Vance, truly regret this?" Ethan looked up, his expression unreadable. "This, Simone, as in trusting me, bringing all of this intense scrutiny and unbearable heat down upon yourself." He did not hesitate, not for a single fleeting moment. "Never." Simone searched his face, her gaze unwavering, waiting for the inevitable catch, the hidden caveat. There wasn't one. "I did not honestly grow up believing men like you genuinely existed," she said softly, a profound honesty in her voice. "And I did not honestly grow up thinking women like you would quite literally save my life," Ethan replied, his voice equally soft, equally honest. They said nothing more, but the very air between them had subtly shifted. No longer purely professional, no longer rigidly cautious. Something unspoken, something profoundly strong and undeniably human filled the quiet space. The following Monday, the internal hearing was held in one of the larger boardrooms typically reserved for high-stakes client briefings. But today, it felt less like an office and more like a hushed formal courtroom. Half of the executive committee was present, along with 2 legal counsels and Simone, who was seated across the table, her hands neatly folded, her eyes remarkably calm. She presented her meticulously prepared report in its entirety, detailed metrics, powerful letters of support, moving video testimonials. She eloquently explained the intricate process of fund allocation, the rigorous review protocols, the comprehensive impact assessments. Her voice, through it all, did not tremble once. Then came the questioning. It was pointed, sharp, almost predatory. "Were you ever explicitly promised full-time employment in exchange for this work, Miss Davies?" "No." "Did you at any point bypass any system of formal approval?" "Not without verbal confirmation from Mr. Vance, which I now fully comprehend should have been documented sooner." "That, Mr. Hayes, represents my learning curve, not any malicious intent." The legal chair, a stern-faced woman, leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on Simone. "Do you believe your personal passion has at any point clouded your professional judgment, Miss Davies?" Simone's gaze did not waver, her eyes meeting the chairwoman's directly. "I believe, Miss Albright, that professional judgment without passion is precisely what created this endemic problem in the first place." A beat of profound silence hung in the air. Then Ethan slowly stood. "I personally authorized every single move Miss Davies made," he declared, his voice resonating with unyielding authority. "If fault lies anywhere, it lies squarely with me. But if your discomfort, ladies and gentlemen, stems from merely observing an intern achieve what most of us have demonstrably failed to accomplish with full funding, then I earnestly suggest we look not at her actions, but at our own outdated standards." The room fell into an immediate, heavy quiet. An hour later, the ruling was delivered. No violation, no censure, and for the very first time in the firm's long history, a groundbreaking clause was officially added to the corporate policy. Community impact initiatives may be led and developed by junior associates pending executive review, including interns. Outside the hearing room, Ethan turned to Simone, a faint smile playing on his lips. "We didn't perhaps win absolutely everything." She nodded. "But we held the line, Mr. Vance." He smiled faintly, a genuine warmth in his eyes. "No, Simone, you moved it." And this time, as they walked back down the long, bustling hallway, there were no whispered doubts, no furtive glances. Only eyes that watched them with something resembling genuine respect, perhaps even a nascent belief. A week after the intense hearing, the building felt subtly, yet undeniably different. The shift wasn't seismic. Walls didn't visibly shake. Antiquated policies weren't rewritten in gleaming gold ink, but there was something quieter, more profoundly telling. When Simone walked into a room, people looked up and they greeted her. Not with caution, not with corporate obligation, but with an unfeigned recognition. She still carried her overflowing folder of grant notes, still instinctively took the stairs. Instead of the elevator, still spent more time at the Haven Collective than within the confines of her own office. But now, her meetings were consistently fuller. Her inbox held genuine invitations, not just perfunctory inquiries, and her title, though still officially unofficial, now undeniably carried significant weight. People quite remarkably called her director without a trace of irony. Yet for all the profound external changes, Simone found herself wrestling with something deeply internal. The storm had passed, but in its wake was an undeniable exhaustion, the kind that doesn't stem from simply doing too much, but from having to repeatedly prove, over and over again, that you unequivocally belong. It was Friday afternoon when Ethan discovered her in the rooftop garden, sitting alone on one of the newly installed benches they'd added months ago during the initial renovation phase. She had her shoes off, her bare feet pressed firmly against the warm, sun-baked wood, her eyes scanning a report, yet not truly absorbing its content. He approached quietly, careful not to startle her. "Hiding from the next crisis, Miss Davies?" he asked gently. She didn't look up, merely responding, "Just catching my breath before it inevitably begins again, Mr. Vance." He sat quietly beside her. "You know, most people would be taking a triumphant victory lap right about now." Simone smiled, but it was devoid of true mirth. "It hardly feels like a victory, Mr. Vance. It feels more like we've merely patched one small hole in an undeniably sinking ship." Ethan leaned back, his gaze sweeping over the city skyline. "Perhaps. Or perhaps, Simone, we just definitively proved that the ship was unequivocally worth saving in the first place." She finally turned to him, her eyes searching. "Why does it invariably take so much, Mr. Vance, to simply prove that what we are doing genuinely matters? Because, Simone, it is inherently easier to dismiss profound progress than it is to graciously share genuine credit." Simone nodded slowly, then looked out over the sprawling city skyline, her gaze distant. "I constantly think about all the other interns, Mr. Vance, the ones who never ever got a fair chance, the ones who departed long before anyone genuinely saw them." Ethan followed her gaze, his expression thoughtful. "You believe we owe them something, Simone?" "I believe, Mr. Vance, we owe them everything." That weekend, Simone sat alone in her apartment and wrote something she hadn't consciously planned a letter, not to a powerful board or a wealthy donor or an influential politician, but to her own 16-year-old self. She wrote with raw honesty about fear, about the sting of being perpetually underestimated, about growing up watching her mother tirelessly juggle two demanding jobs, and yet still miraculously find the strength and time to teach her how to articulate truth without ever needing to raise her voice. She concluded it with a powerful line she never in her wildest dreams thought she would ever truly believe. "They'll try relentlessly to stop you, dear Simone, but you will profoundly learn that not even firmly locked doors can hold back someone who consistently brings their very own key." The next day, she brought the letter to the Haven Collective, not to read it aloud, but to humbly post it. She carefully taped it to the wall in the bustling classroom where the teenagers gathered after school, a vibrant space they had all painted together, adorned with colorful murals, overflowing bookshelves, and vast maps dotted with the countries their families had proudly originated from. A young girl named Maya read the letter slowly, her brow furrowed in concentration, then asked, her voice soft with wonder, "Miss Simone, did you genuinely feel like that too?" Simone smiled, a gentle, understanding expression. "Every single day, Maya." Maya nodded quiet for a long moment, then said, her voice filled with newfound resolve, "I want to write one too, Miss Simone." Simone, without hesitation, retrieved a pen for her. Meanwhile, across the vast city, Ethan sat in a crucial meeting with the board of a new burgeoning education trust, one he had graciously agreed to fund, but only if certain stringent terms were unequivocally met. He demanded comprehensive scholarship programs meticulously tied to tangible community impact work, paid internships that directly led to meaningful policy change, and a rotating mentorship council that actively included diverse voices from far outside the narrow confines of the corporate world. The chairwoman, a formidable figure, raised an eyebrow, a hint of skepticism in her voice. "Mr. Vance, you are requesting us to fund community leaders who possess no traditional academic background. That, sir, is a considerable gamble." Ethan leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. So was Madam Chairwoman betting on a teenage girl from the South Chicago district with an insatiable love for literacy and absolutely no business degree. Her name is Simone Davies, and I would without a shadow of a doubt make that exact same bet again every single time. The vote passed unanimously. By the time Ethan returned to his expansive office, a message was patiently waiting for him. Found a small school in Inglewood, deeply underfunded, mostly first-generation students. The principal asked if we would consider speaking next Friday. Are you in S? He replied immediately, "Only if you drive. I owe you a playlist." That Friday, the drive was long, but surprisingly easy. Music played low, the windows were cracked just enough for the crisp autumn wind to dance playfully in the car. At the school, they were welcomed not with stiff formality, but with an overwhelming warmth. Handmade signs, joyous giggles, and neat rows of folding chairs patiently set up in the modest library. Simone spoke first, not as a symbol, not as an unattainable exception, but simply as a woman who had once been profoundly underestimated and who now chose with immense purpose to overestimate every single young person present in that room. Ethan followed his remarks, brief and profoundly candid. "I am not here today because I always got it right," he confessed, his voice humble. "I am here because I finally started genuinely listening to people who unequivocally did." As they left, a young boy about 10 years old chased after them, his small legs pumping. He handed Simone a crude sketch of a tree with roots shaped distinctly, like open books. At the base, in shaky, childish handwriting, were the words, "You help us grow." She knelt, her eyes soft, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "You're already growing, dear one." In the car, Ethan looked over at her, a quiet pride in his eyes. "That's definitely going on the wall, Simone. Right next to my letter, Mr. Vance." She affirmed, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. They drove on, the sun beginning its slow, majestic dip below the skyline. The light stretched long and golden across the road, the kind of light that doesn't erase shadows, but instead gives them distinct, meaningful shape. The kind of light that invariably finds those who never overtly asked to be seen, but who now, profoundly, could not possibly be ignored. And for the first time in a very long while, Simone didn't feel like she was relentlessly fighting to hold her precarious place. She felt instead like she was actively building a sturdy bridge, and others were tentatively, yet surely, beginning to cross. Winter arrived early that year. The sprawling city wore gray like a second skin, low, heavy clouds hugging the skyline sidewalks glossed with a fine, persistent mist. But inside Vance Dynamics' gleaming headquarters, a storm of an entirely different kind was brewing. Simone stood at the edge of the main atrium, staring at a massive banner being painstakingly installed above the central stairwell. Equity is not optional. Annual gala and community honors. It was the very first time the company would host such an event, co-sponsored by local nonprofits and proudly co-chaired by Simone and Ethan. On paper, it appeared to be undeniable progress. But behind the scenes, subtle, insidious cracks were already beginning to form. The day before, Simone had received a forwarded email from a junior associate, an internal thread among high-level executives debating the optics of having too many activist figures on stage, accompanied by thinly veiled concerns about alienating high-value investors. Ethan had seen it too, and he had been livid. "They still don't get it, Simone," he had fumed, pacing the luxurious floor of the strategy suite. "They genuinely believe this is about quotas and superficial appearances." Simone, ever the calmer of the two, replied, "They believe it's merely a phase, Mr. Vance, like we're a transient season of programming that will quietly, inevitably end." Now she stood watching that monumental banner rise, and she wondered with a deep ache what would truly outlast the fleeting moment, the profound mission, or the elaborate masquerade. 3 nights later, the gala commenced, ushered in by a string quartet playing classical melodies and the clinking of chilled champagne glasses. The grand ballroom glistened under the soft glow of myriad crystal chandeliers reflecting off the polished marble floors as donors in shimmering silk and satin mingled. Photographers moved through the elegant crowd like polite, silent ghosts, capturing every carefully orchestrated moment. Simone wore a deep navy gown, her hair pinned back simply elegantly. She detested the attention, yet she understood its undeniable necessity. She was now the face, not just of a burgeoning department, but of a profound, sweeping shift. Ethan, standing proudly beside her, looked every bit the seasoned, confident executive in his impeccably tailored black tuxedo, but his keen eyes constantly scanned the room, noting who smiled with genuine sincerity, who pointedly avoided their gaze, who patiently waited to observe if this bold experiment would quietly fade into obscurity by the next quarter. A staffer approached them, clipboard in hand. "Miss Davies, you are scheduled to speak in precisely 8 minutes. Simone nodded, her composure unwavering. "I will be ready." She turned towards the side entrance, seeking a moment of quiet solitude to compose herself before the crucial speech. That's when she saw him. Mr. Sterling, a senior board member known equally for his superficial charm and his deep-seated resistance to change. He was engaged in conversation with 2 influential investors near the bar, laughing heartily. When he noticed Simone, he offered a polite, almost imperceptible nod, but it did not critically reach his eyes. Ethan followed her gaze. "He tried relentlessly to cut the funding for the mentorship program last month." Ethan murmured, his voice low. "Are you absolutely certain you still wish to go up there?" Simone didn't answer right away, her gaze fixed on Mr. Sterling's smug face. Then her voice firm, resolute. "Especially now, Mr. Vance." The vast room quieted significantly as she gracefully stepped onto the brightly lit stage. Behind her, a massive enlargement of the Haven Collective mural served as a powerful backdrop, depicting children painting a magnificent tree of hands, each finger rendered in a different vibrant color. The image flickered slightly under the intense stage lights. Simone looked out at the expectant crowd, her gaze sweeping across the sea of faces. Then she began, her voice, though quiet, carrying remarkable weight. "When I first walked into this formidable building, I did so quietly. I truly believed that if I merely stayed small, if I consistently stayed useful, I would simply survive. And I did survive undeniably, but at a significant, profound cost." She paused, allowing her words to resonate. "Tonight we are here to celebrate community, but genuine community, I assure you, demands discomfort. It unequivocally demands that we bravely confront the very systems that inexplicably prefer silence to inevitable, profound progress." The room shifted ever so slightly, a collective intake of breath. "I have meticulously read your reports, ladies and gentlemen. I am intimately familiar with your corporate language, ESG, Delaware Incorporation impact metrics. But beyond the cold, abstract metrics are living, breathing people, children, who now joyfully read at the Haven Collective because we collectively said yes when it would have been immeasurably easier to simply say, 'Not yet.'" She continued, her voice steady, unwavering. "This, ladies and gentlemen, is not a passing trend. It is a profound, undeniable truth. We do not build a lasting legacy by being perpetually careful. We build it with unwavering conviction by being profoundly brave." Silence, then a smattering of tentative applause, then more swelling rapidly. Ethan stepped up beside her, his presence a silent, powerful endorsement. "If this indeed makes anyone here uncomfortable, then I submit, ladies and gentlemen, that is profoundly good. Genuine change should consistently feel like motion, not merely slick marketing." The applause swelled, becoming a roaring wave of sound, yet not everyone clapped. Mr. Sterling, near the bar, slowly sipped his drink, his jaw tight, his eyes narrowed with ill-concealed disapproval. Later, as the gala slowly wound down and guests filtered out into the crisp night, Simone stepped onto the outdoor balcony, seeking a moment to simply breathe. The cold air hit her face like a profound question. What precisely comes after courage? Ethan joined her, extending a warm cup of cider. "You were absolutely brilliant, Simone." "I was angry, Mr. Vance," she corrected quietly. He nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. "Sometimes, Simone, that is precisely the same thing." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the blurred streaks of headlights below, cutting through the wet, glistening streets. Then Ethan spoke. "They will push back even harder now, Simone. You understand that, don't you?" "I know," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "They'll attempt to freeze the budget to systematically undermine the programs." "I know," Ethan affirmed, his gaze meeting hers. Simone looked out at the sprawling, vibrant city below them. "Then we build it anyway, Mr. Vance." He smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across his face. "That, Simone, is precisely what I hoped you would say." Just then, Simone's phone buzzed softly. A text message from Maya, the young teen from the Haven Collective. "Our mural made the local paper. They called us the beating heart of change." Simone grinned, a genuine radiant smile, then looked at Ethan. "They're watching, Mr. Vance." "Let them," he said, his voice imbued with a quiet power. "We have absolutely nothing to hide." Below them, the sprawling city breathed, flawed, beautiful, forever unfinished. And above it, two figures stood, not as grand heroes or as abstract symbols, but as tireless workers engaged in the long, slow, arduous labor of justice. It began quietly, as all true profound change ultimately does. The Monday after the highly publicized gala, while the city's newspapers were still quoting Simone's powerful speech and meticulously dissecting Ethan's poignant final line, the Haven Collective opened its doors promptly at 6:45 a.m. As usual, the heaters buzzed softly to life. Fresh coffee brewed its aroma, filling the space. Children shuffled in, many wearing oversized coats, some with untied shoelaces, some carrying vast burgeoning dreams and small, well-worn notebooks. And Simone was there, not in elegant heels or under the glare of a spotlight, but in her favorite comfortable boots and an old faded hoodie, diligently rolling out boxes of newly donated books. She moved through the halls with the instinctive grace of muscle memory. Now this sacred place wasn't merely a passion project. It was her rhythm, her anchor, the very core of her being. Later that morning, Maya greeted her with a new drawing, a simple stick figure standing on a tall, arching bridge, its arms raised triumphantly. Underneath, she had carefully written in shaky, nascent handwriting, "Because you stood, we could walk." Simone's throat tightened, a sudden lump forming. She hugged the girl tightly, fiercely. "You're building bridges now too, Maya," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. As the day progressed, new volunteers arrived, a retired schoolteacher who had quite serendipitously watched the gala online, a local chef who generously offered to run weekend cooking classes, even two cautious interns from a rival firm, their curiosity evident their demeanor, tentative, asking hesitantly, "Can we perhaps learn here?" Word had spread not as a fleeting headline, but as a steady, insistent heartbeat resonating throughout the community. Back at Advanced Dynamics, Ethan sat at his sprawling desk, staring intently at the numbers on a quarterly impact report. Not because they were merely impressive, though they undeniably were, but because each cold statistic now possessed a name, a precious moment, a tangible ripple effect. And behind every single ripple, every single quantifiable success was Simone. The soft knock came mid-morning. He looked up. It was Simone. "I thought you were scheduled to be off today," he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. "I was," she replied, a faint smile playing on her lips, but something quite literally came up. She walked in and gently placed a letter on his polished desk. He picked it up slowly. "Read it," then read it again more deliberately. It was her resignation. He looked up slowly, his heart sinking. "You're leaving Simone?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She nodded. "Not from the work, Mr. Vance, just from the title." He leaned back, a mixture of pride and sadness warring within him. "Tell me why, Simone." "Because it's time, Mr. Vance. The work, this profound mission, cannot solely exist within the confines of one corporate office. It needs roots, Ethan. It needs to grow organically to truly expand beyond the narrow confines of any single brand." He rubbed his jaw, a thoughtful gesture. "And you, Simone, what will you do?" "I am taking what we meticulously built together, Ethan and I, and planting it everywhere else, widely and deeply." He stared at her pride, unmistakably warring with a profound sadness. "You know, Simone, they will undoubtedly say you quit because you were afraid." Simone smiled, a genuine, confident smile. "Let them talk, Mr. Vance. I will be far too busy, unequivocally doing." He stood extending his hand, but she hugged him instead, a firm, meaningful embrace. It wasn't goodbye, not truly goodbye. 3 months later, Simone stood in front of a modest, unassuming building on the edge of the historic Bronzeville neighborhood. The paint was chipped in places. The sign, temporarily affixed, proudly proclaimed the Davies Leadership Hub. But the voices emanating from inside were loud in the very best way. Young people passionately debating policy, elders wisely sharing strategic insights, artists sketching vibrant visions of future cities. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't sleek or grand or polished, but it was hers, theirs. Ethan visited sometimes not as a commanding CEO, but as a trusted mentor, a cherished friend. They still engaged in spirited arguments over methodologies, still swapped heartfelt stories, and sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence and listened. On one particular visit, he discovered a new mural being painted on the east wall. It depicted a magnificent tree with roots shaped distinctly like open books, just like the drawing Maya had given her months ago. But this time, at the very base of the tree, stood two figures, a woman and a man, shoulder to shoulder, holding up a sturdy, symbolic bridge. Ethan touched the wall gently, his fingers tracing the painted figures. A young volunteer passed by, noticing his gaze. "You know," the girl offered brightly, "the girl who designed that mural said it was all about building something far stronger than fear." He smiled, a quiet knowing in his eyes. She would know, dear one. That evening, before leaving, Ethan found Simone reviewing notes for an upcoming town hall meeting. "You are truly unequivocally doing it, Simone," he said, his voice filled with admiration. She looked up, a slight frown on her face. "Doing what precisely, Mr. Vance?" "Changing the story, Simone. One sentence at a time." She shrugged, a modest gesture. "It's not just me, Ethan." "No," he agreed, his gaze softening. "But you were undeniably the sentence that profoundly changed the entire page." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment longer. Then Simone said, her voice filled with quiet determination, "There's still so much more to write, Ethan." Ethan nodded, a profound understanding passing between them. "There always is, Simone. There always, always is." As he left, she turned off the lights, carefully locking the door behind him. The street outside was quiet, but not empty. Somewhere a child laughed, a distant, hopeful sound. A bus rumbled by its engine, a low thrum. A vibrant mural dried in the cold, crisp air. And inside that humble center, profound hope waited. Not on a grand stage, not in a flashy press release, but on the next quiet breath, the next deliberate step, the next outstretched hand reaching back to gently pull another forward. Because justice ultimately isn't loud, it is profoundly, undeniably steady, and it never ever stops walking.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.